I don't remember the exact moment the darkness ended. 1 second there was nothing. No sound, no thought, no self. Then pain. It ripped through my chest like a jagged lightning bolt, snapping me awake with a violent gasp. My eyes shot open, blinded by sterile white light. The ceiling above me blurred and spun, as if the whole world had been tossed into a blender. Something was wrong. Terribly wrong. I tried to move, but my body protested with screams of pain from every muscle and bone. Plastic tubes snaked out of my arms like tangled vines. I could feel thick bandages wound tight around my chest. Every shallow breath reminded me that my ribcage had been cracked open and put back together again. "Mr. Thompson, you're awake." The voice came from my left. A woman in a white coat appeared beside me, her face framed by wire-rimmed glasses. Her eyes were kind but steady. "I'm Dr. Carter, your cardiologist. How are you feeling?" Like I was hit by a truck, I rasped. My throat burned. Every word was a struggle. What happened to me?" She checked the monitor near my bed, her expression calm, professional. "You had emergency open-heart surgery 2 days ago. A triple bypass. During the procedure, your heart stopped for 47 seconds. 47 seconds. The number echoed through my mind like stones dropping down a bottomless well. "Did I die?" I whispered. "Technically, yes," she answered softly. "But we brought you back." Her fingers pressed lightly against my wrist, counting my pulse, anchoring me back to the land of the living. "You're stable now," she assured me. "The operation was successful. You'll need at least 2 weeks here to recover, then a slow return to your normal activities." 2 weeks. 2 weeks in the sterile room with its beeping machines and antiseptic smell. I glanced at the tiny window, showing only a gray Dallas sky. No flowers on the bedside table. No cards. No sign anyone knew or cared that I was here. A nurse entered then, brisk but gentle. "Mr. Thompson, I'm Jennifer. I'll be taking care of you this shift. Are you in pain?" I nodded. She adjusted the drip connected to my arm, and within minutes the sharp edges of agony softened into something tolerable. Dr. Carter pulled up a chair. "I need to check your cognitive functions," she said. "Can you tell me what year it is?" 2025. "And the month?" "January." She smiled. "Good. Now, squeeze my hand as hard as you can." I gripped her fingers with all the strength I had, which was pitifully weak, but she nodded encouragingly. "Motor skills look intact. Memory, too. The next few days will focus on pain control and gentle movement. We'll have you walking short distances soon." After they left, I was alone again with the machines and their endless beeping. My hand fumbled toward the bedside table, where someone had placed my belongings. My phone, dozens of notifications, news alerts, spam emails, pharmacy reminders. I scrolled desperately, searching for something, anything from my family. Messages from my wife, Susan. Missed calls from my son, Scott. Nothing. In our family group chat, the last message was weeks ago. Susan complaining about yogurt being out of stock at the grocery store. Before that, Scott asking me to lend him money for car repairs. Nothing about me. Nothing about the surgery. Nothing about whether I had even survived. I set the phone down with trembling fingers and stared at the ceiling tiles above me. 47 seconds of death, and apparently nobody noticed I was gone. I closed my eyes. The smell of antiseptic triggered memories I had tried to bury. The first twinges of chest pain in the summer of 2020, dismissing it as Texas heat while planting tomatoes in the backyard. Susan calling out from the porch, iced tea in her hand. "Buford, stop being dramatic. Come inside before you give yourself a stroke." By 2021, climbing the stairs to our bedroom felt like Everest. My heart pounding, the world tilting sideways if I stood too fast. Susan never noticed, too absorbed in her late-night shows. When I mentioned exhaustion to Scott, he shrugged from his spot on the couch. "Maybe see a doctor, Dad. Or, try vitamins. Hospitals are expensive." A Tuesday morning in March 2023, the real attack hit. Coffee brewing in the kitchen, then agony like a sledgehammer to the chest. I collapsed onto the cold linoleum, calling for Susan. She found me 10 minutes later, barely breathing. "Oh, Buford, did you fall?" she said, more annoyed than afraid. She helped me into a chair, but soon glanced at the clock. "I've got a hair appointment in an hour. Can you drive yourself to the ER?" I did. The young doctor confirmed what I already feared. It wasn't age or stress. My arteries were closing like rusted pipes. "Without surgery, you have 6 months, maybe less, Dr. Martinez had told me in November. With a triple bypass, you could have 10 good years. 10 years. But the question gnawed at me then as it does now. Did I want to spend them with people who barely noticed if I was alive? The door creaked open again, and Jennifer peeked in with her warm smile. "How are you feeling, Mr. Thompson? Need more pain relief?" I looked at my silent phone. No texts, no calls, just a void where love should be. She tilted her head, reading my expression. "Surgery gives people time to think," she said quietly. "Sometimes that a blessing, sometimes not." After she left, I stared again at the family chat. My finger hovered over keyboard. 2 weeks in this hospital. 2 weeks of silence. Maybe they didn't know. Maybe the hospital hadn't reached them properly. Maybe after 45 years of marriage and raising a son, I still meant something. On the morning of January 29th, the doctor signed my discharge papers. My bag was packed. My reading glasses, a paperback novel I hadn't touched, pajamas still faintly smelling of home. My chest was fragile but stronger. I typed in the family chat. "Hey everyone, they're releasing me today. Feeling much better. Can't wait to see you." Deleted it. Too needy. Tried again. Hospital says I can go home today. Looking forward to being back. Deleted. Still too much. Finally I wrote, "Doctor says I'm clear to come home today. Would love to see you all." I hit send. My heart fluttered with hope. The reply came faster than I expected. Scott's name appeared first. "Call a taxi. I'm watching TV." I read it 3 times, making sure I hadn't misunderstood. 2 weeks in ICU, 47 seconds of death, and my son couldn't be bothered to press pause on a show. But surely Susan would be different. After 45 years, she would want to bring me home herself. Her message popped up beneath his. "Stay another month at the hospital. It's so nice without you here." The phone slipped from my hands onto the white hospital blanket. Her words glowed on the screen like neon letters spelling out the end of everything I thought I knew about my family. "Stay another month. So nice without you." The pain in my chest wasn't from the surgery this time. It came from deeper, from a place no scalpel could ever reach. The screen dimmed after Susan's message, but the words were burned into my vision. "Stay another month at the hospital. It's so nice without you." I had faced death, but somehow that text felt worse. The hospital was sterile and cold, but at least here I mattered to someone. The nurses checked on me. The doctors spoke to me with respect. Machines beeped in rhythm with my heartbeat, a reminder that I was still alive. Home, it seemed, was where I'd already been written off. I ordered a taxi. The ride back was quiet except for the driver's radio playing soft country music. Dallas rolled by the window. Strip malls, billboards, winter trees stripped bare. The air outside looked as lifeless as I felt. When we pulled up to the house, nothing had changed. The lawn was still patchy. The same sagging porch light I'd been meaning to replace for years hung crooked. The driver helped me with my small bag. No one came to the door. No one waited on the porch. I let myself in with my key. The living room smelled faintly of popcorn. Susan was stretched out on the recliner, wrapped in a blanket, her eyes glued to the TV. She didn't look up when I entered. Didn't even flinch at the sound of the door closing. "You're back," she said flatly. Her tone was the same she used when I once tracked Mud into the house. "Thought you'd stay longer." I set my bag down gently, careful with my chest. The doctor said I was ready. "I want to come home." She didn't reply. On the screen, a laugh track played. She chuckled along. I turned toward the kitchen. Scott was sitting at the table, slouched over his phone, scrolling endlessly. He didn't rise, didn't smile. "Hey, Dad," he muttered. "You look different." "I had open-heart surgery," I said, forcing a smile that no one returned. "Oh, cool." He went back to scrolling. I stood there in the kitchen doorway, the house that had been my pride. Every nail hammered by my own hands in '87. Every inch of lawn mowed under the hot Texas sun. It no longer felt like mine. It felt like a hotel I wasn't welcome in. I shuffled to the guest room. Not our bedroom. Susan had taken that over years ago with her endless piles of throw pillows and scented candles. I had been sleeping in the guest room since 2019, after she declared my snoring unbearable. The bedspread was wrinkled, the sheets stale. My side of the closet was filled with boxes of old decorations and dusty exercise equipment. 2 weeks in the ICU, and this was my welcome home. That night, Susan made herself dinner, microwave lasagna. She didn't ask if I wanted any. I made a sandwich with stale bread and a slice of processed cheese. Scott grabbed fast food and ate in front of his computer. We didn't eat together. We hadn't in years. As I sat alone at the kitchen table, chewing my dry sandwich, I thought back to when this room had been filled with life. Susan humming while cooking chili. Scott doing homework while I checked bills. The three of us laughing at some inside joke. That was 20 years ago. Now the silence was deafening. At 3 a.m., I lay awake in the guest bed, staring at the ceiling fan. Every breath was heavy, my chest stitched together like fragile glass. I thought about those 47 seconds my heart had stopped. In that void, I hadn't seen a tunnel of light. I hadn't heard angels. I had seen nothing. And now, back among the living, I wonder if maybe that nothingness had been kinder. The days blurred. I tried to ease back into routine, watering the dying plants, sorting the mail, folding laundry. Susan criticized my folding. Scott ignored me. I was a ghost in my own home. One evening, I asked Susan if she could drive me to a follow-up appointment. She didn't look away from her show. Can't. Salon appointment. Maybe Scott, I suggested. Scott sighed, eyes locked on his phone. Busy, Dad. Just Uber. Uber to my own cardiologist. After nearly dying. That was their solution. The silence between us grew heavier each day, pressing down like a weight on my chest worse than any clogged artery. By the second week, I stopped trying. I sat on the back porch with a blanket, staring at the skeletal trees, wondering how many springs I had left. And for the first time in my life, a dangerous thought crept in. Maybe I didn't want to spend them here. The guest room was cold that night. Not physically. The heater clicked on and off with the same dull rhythm as always. But emotionally. The kind of cold that seeps into your bones because you realize no one in this house even notices whether you're warm. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to Susan's TV show laugh track bleeding through the wall. Every Ken chuckle was a reminder that she was awake, alive, and entertained, just not with me. Scott's muffled video game sounds came from down the hall, explosions and gunfire through his headset. And me? I was lying there with stitches in my chest, trying not to sneeze because it might tear me apart. That was when my mind began to wander. Not forward. God knows the future looked like a barren desert. But backward. To all the years I had given, piece by piece, to these two people who now treated me like an old rug left in the garage. 1978, the motorcycle. I was 26 when I bought my Harley. Black, chrome shining like a mirror, the kind of bike that makes a man feel untouchable. I rode it up and down Texas back roads, hair long, jacket worn, the smell of gasoline and freedom in my nose. It was the happiest I'd ever been. Then Susan got pregnant. I remember her standing in the kitchen, hands on her small belly, and I swear I had never loved her more. But babies need cribs, not motorcycles. I sold the Harley within a week, used the money to buy a second-hand crib and paint for the nursery. I told myself it was no sacrifice. I told myself that giving up pieces of myself was just what fathers did. 1985, Paris. By then, Scott was 7. Susan and I had been planning a trip to Paris for years, saving every spare penny in an envelope we kept hidden in the dresser. Eiffel Tower, the Louvre, wine by the Seine. We dreamed of it every night. Then Scott came home with a flyer. Gifted summer program. Tuition we couldn't afford, not unless we emptied that Paris envelope. We did. I told Susan we'd go next year. That was 40 years ago. I've never seen Paris. 1994, the job. I had an offer once. A construction firm in Houston wanted me as foreman. Twice the pay, better benefits. It would have meant moving, longer hours. Susan said no, too disruptive. She didn't want to leave her friends. Scott was 12, moody and quiet. So I stayed, took the smaller paycheck. Stayed in the same house, in the same neighborhood, watching other men drive nicer trucks and retire earlier. But I told myself, at least Susan is happy. At least Scott is stable. 2003, the loan. Scott was 21, already struggling. College had chewed him up and spit him out. He came to me with big eyes and big promises about starting his own business. Dad, I just need a cosigner. Please, this is my chance. Susan pushed me to do it. He's our only son. If we don't help him, who will? I signed. The business failed in less than a year. The debt didn't. We lost our savings cushion. That was the moment I realized retirement would never be an option for me. 2019, the bedroom. It had been building for years, but that was the year Susan finally said out loud, "Your snoring is unbearable. I can't sleep a single night. From now on, you'll sleep in the guest room. I moved quietly. No fight, no protest. Just gathered my pillow and left the bed we had shared for 45 years. That was when I became a guest in my own marriage. And now, 2025, I gave up motorcycles, Paris, promotions, savings, even my own bed. I gave him my life on a silver platter. And what did I get in return? Call a taxi. It's so nice without you here. The words echoed like hammers in my skull. I tried to talk to Susan one morning over coffee. Or rather, she had coffee. I had a glass of water because caffeine made my chest burn now. Susan, I said softly, do you realize how close I came to dying? She didn't look up from her crossword. You're fine now. That's all that matters. That's all that matters? My voice cracked. She sighed. Buford, don't make this dramatic. People have surgeries all the time. You're not special. Not special. I wanted to scream. To remind her that I had built this house with my hands. That I had worked 50-hour weeks so she could stay home when Scott was little. That I had given up everything I ever wanted so that she could have what she wanted. But I stayed silent. I swallowed the words, like I had been doing for decades. And in that silence, something shifted inside me. The radical thought, it came slowly like a whisper at first. What if I just left? Not in a coffin, not carried out by paramedics after another attack, but on my own 2 feet, while I still had breath in my lungs. The thought terrified me. 72 years old, stitched together by surgeons, living on borrowed time. Where would I even go? What would I even do? But then another thought followed. Haven't I already been dead? 47 seconds without a heartbeat. 2 weeks without a single visit. Meals eaten alone in the same house as my wife and son. If this was life, how different was it from death? I found myself staring at my phone late one night, scrolling through old photos. Susan and I on our wedding day. She enlaced me in a rented tux, both smiling like we'd stolen the world. Scott at 5, holding my hand, his cheeks sticky with birthday cake. Where had they gone? Not just the people in those photos, but the people I had been. Somewhere along the way, I stopped being Buford. I became Dad, the ATM, husband, the handyman, Ghost, the unwanted roommate. The next morning, I woke up with a strange clarity. I sat on the edge of the bed, my chest aching, and whispered aloud, if I've only got 10 years left, I'm not spending them invisible. I didn't announce it. I didn't fight. I simply started small. I walked down to the porch and sat with the morning sun warming my face. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to imagine a future that wasn't chained to this house. Maybe I'd sell it. Maybe I'd take whatever money was left and buy a trailer. Maybe I'd finally ride through Texas again, on 4 wheels if not 2. I didn't know the details yet, but I knew this. I wasn't going to die in that guest room, forgotten by the 2 people who should have loved me most. For the first time in decades, I wasn't afraid of the unknown. I was afraid of staying the same, and that, I realized, was the beginning of something dangerous, something powerful, something like freedom. When I woke up the next morning, the house was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. Susan had already left for her salon appointment. Scott was still asleep, his door closed tight. I sat at the edge of the bed, staring at my hands. They shook slightly, not from weakness, but from the weight of a decision I hadn't yet spoken aloud. I wasn't going to die here. That thought repeated in my head like a drumbeat. For years, I convinced myself that this was life. Quiet resignation, endless sacrifice, being tolerated rather than loved. But dying on an operating table had changed something. If I had been given another chance, why was I wasting it? I shuffled into the kitchen and made myself toast. The bread was still stale, but I ate it anyway. My eyes kept drifting to the small pile of bills stacked near the phone. Electricity, water, mortgage. I'd been paying them faithfully for decades. Every check written by my hand, every overtime hour, worked to keep the lights on. And for what? So Susan could sit on that recliner watching game shows? So Scott could scroll his phone while 30 years old with no plan, no job, no ambition? A bitter laugh escaped me. I'd spent my whole life making sure they were comfortable, and in return, I had become invisible. After breakfast, I found myself in the garage. Dust coated everything, old tools, boxes of Christmas decorations, a lawnmower that hadn't started in years. My eyes landed on an old fishing pole propped in the corner. I hadn't touched it since Scott was a boy, back when he used to beg me to take him to the lake. He always lost interest after 15 minutes, but those were still the best days of my life. I picked up the pole, ran my fingers along the cracked handle, and felt something stir in me. Maybe I could still fish. Maybe I could still drive out to the lake. Feel the sun on my face, the line tug in the water. That afternoon, Susan came home with shopping bags. She set them on the counter, without looking at me. "Did you pay the water bill?" she asked. "Yes," I answered. "Good." She walked away. No thank you. No question about how I was feeling. Just an assumption that I was still the one keeping everything running. Later, when Scott finally emerged from his cave or room, he asked if I had cash for gas. No, how's your chest? No, glad you're alive. Just a hand held out. Something inside me hardened. I gave him $20, but in my mind, I was already done. That night, lying in bed, I began to plan. I didn't have much. Some savings in the bank, a small pension from the company I had given my best years to, maybe a couple of things in the garage I could sell. It wasn't much, but it was enough to start. I didn't need luxury. I didn't need Paris anymore. I just needed peace. I thought about buying an old pickup, maybe a small camper. I could drive south, follow the highways, find a quiet town where nobody knew me, somewhere I could sit at a diner in the mornings, drink coffee, and be seen. Not admired, not celebrated. Just seen. The idea both terrified and thrilled me. I was 72, stitched together with surgical thread, and yet for the first time in decades, I felt alive. Susan snored softly through the wall. Scott's laughter drifted from his room, some video blaring on his phone. And me? I lay there with my eyes wide open, imagining a road stretching out before me, endless and full of possibility. I didn't know when and I didn't know how, but I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I was leaving. The first step was money. I hadn't thought seriously about finances in years, not beyond writing checks and balancing what little came in against what always seemed to go out. Retirement was never an option. Susan made sure of that with her spending, Scott with his failures, and me with my silence. But now, sitting at the kitchen table with a dull pencil and a yellowed notepad, I began to list what I had. My pension wasn't large, but it existed. A small savings account. Some tools in the garage worth something if I found the right buyer. Maybe even a Harley jacket I hadn't worn since 1978. It was still hanging in the closet, smelling faintly of leather and gasoline, a ghost of the man I used to be. I wrote numbers down, crossed them out, wrote new ones. It wasn't much. It wasn't enough to start a new life in comfort, but it was enough to start a life in freedom. The thought gave me a shiver. Freedom, a word I hadn't used in years. The next day, I began small. I went into the garage under the excuse of cleaning, and I pulled out an old toolbox. My hand still knew the way of a wrench, the cool steel of a screwdriver. I wiped them down, one by one, placed them neatly in a box. I took pictures on my phone, shaky though they were, and posted them on a local marketplace. Within hours, someone messaged me. By evening, a stranger was in my driveway handing me $50 cash. I stood there with the bills in my hand, heart racing. Not because of the money, it was nothing really, but because for the first time in decades, I had done something entirely for myself. Susan didn't notice the missing tools. Scott didn't ask. They never set foot in the garage anyway. Over the next week, I sold more. The fishing pole, the old lawnmower, a set of shelves that had sat in the corner collecting dust. Piece by piece, I turned clutter into cash, and with every sale, my resolve grew. At night, I lay awake imagining the road. I could almost hear the hum of tires on asphalt, the rush of wind through an open window. I imagined rolling down back highways, stopping at diners where the waitress knew my name after a week. I pictured fishing again, drinking coffee as the sun rose, reading books no one ever asked me about. For the first time since my heart stopped, I felt it beating with purpose. One evening, Susan caught me counting the cash at the kitchen table. "What's that?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "Just selling some old junk," I said, quickly. "Tools I don't use anymore." She shrugged. "As long as you don't expect me to clean the garage." Then she went back to her crossword. Not even a question. Not even curiosity. Scott, on the other hand, noticed when I started to refuse him money. "Dad, can you spot me 40 for gas?" he asked one afternoon. "I can't," I answered flatly. "What do you mean you can't? You always do." "Not anymore." He blinked at me, as if the earth had tilted sideways. "What's your problem?" "My problem is that I almost died and neither of you seem to care," I said quietly. He scoffed, rolled his eyes, and muttered something under his breath as he walked away. But I noticed the way his shoulders stiffened, the way his steps grew louder down the hall. He wasn't used to hearing no from me. Good. He needed to hear it. The next step was harder. Clothes. I hadn't bought myself anything new in years, not beyond cheap socks or undershirts. Susan had her closets full. Scott had his endless stream of sneakers and electronics. But me, I lived in the same jeans and flannel shirts I'd worn for decades. So one morning, while Susan was out and Scott was still asleep, I drove to the thrift store. My chest ached as I turned the key in the ignition, a dull reminder that I wasn't invincible anymore. But the drive itself felt like liberation. Windows down, air sharp against my skin, radio humming softly. I hadn't felt so alive in years. Inside the thrift store, I wandered the aisles like a man in a museum. Jackets, boots, shirts that didn't carry the smell of old drywall and sweat. I picked out a denim jacket, a pair of sturdy boots, a hat that shaded my eyes. It wasn't much, but when I looked at myself in the mirror, I didn't see dad or husband or ghost. I saw a man who might still have a chance. I paid cash, folded the clothes neatly into a bag, and drove home with a smile on my face. Susan never noticed a new jacket. Scott didn't either. But I noticed, and that was enough. Days bled into weeks. Every morning, I found something else to sell, some small corner of the life I had built that I no longer needed. Every night, I added the bills to a growing envelope hidden under the floorboard in the garage. My secret, my future. Sometimes, guilt gnawed at me. I would hear Susan humming in the kitchen or Scott laughing at the screen, and I would wonder if I was betraying them. But then I would remember the hospital bed, the empty visitor's chair, the silence of phone. I would remember Susan's words. It's so nice without you here. No, I wasn't betraying them. They had betrayed me a long time ago. One night, as I sat on the porch watching the sun sink behind the trees, I thought about Paris again, about the Eiffel Tower I had never seen, the river I had never walked beside, the wine I had never tasted. I had given all that up for them, for their comfort, for their dreams. And what had it gotten me? A guest room, a taxi ride home alone, a heart that stopped for 47 seconds, and a family that didn't blink. I whispered into the evening air, not anymore. The words fell heavy, like a promise carved into stone. From that day forward, everything I did was a step toward leaving. My walks grew longer, not just for recovery, but for scouting. I noticed a used car lot on Main Street, the old campers parked behind a fence, the cheap motels on the highway. I watched people, men my age, women alone, drifters, retirees, and I wonder if I could be like them, if I could disappear into the flow of strangers and never look back. Each step made me bolder, each plan clearer. I was no longer waiting to die. I was preparing to live. Nights became my sanctuary. While Susan snored in the bedroom and Scott stayed glued to his glowing screen, I moved silently through the house like a thief in my own life. Every drawer I opened, every item I touched carried a history I had long forgotten. Some things I kept. Most I let go. From the closet, I took down the leather jacket I hadn't worn since my 20s. It was cracked and stiff, but when I slipped it on, the weight of it made my chest expand. I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror, the dim light flickering overhead, and for a moment I almost didn't recognize a man staring back. He looked older, yes, but also harder, stronger, a man who hadn't yet given up. I folded the jacket carefully and tucked it beneath the loose floorboard in the garage, next to the growing envelope of cash. That space became my secret vault, the foundation of my escape. During the days, I moved slower, feigning the frailty Susan and Scott expected of me. I let them believe I was just an old man recovering, too weak to argue, too tired to demand more. But inside, every step was deliberate. Every sale, every hidden dollar was a piece of a puzzle only I could see. Susan remained oblivious. She drifted in and out of house, her shopping bags multiplying, her tone clipped whenever she spoke to me. Sometimes she forgot I was even in the room. Once, as she chatted with a friend on the phone, I overheard her say, "Honestly, it's like living with a ghost. He just sits there." She didn't know how right she was. I was a ghost in this house, but I was learning how to haunt with purpose. Scott was worse. His request for money grew sharper, his entitlement more obvious. When I refused him again, he snapped. "You've changed," he said, glaring at me. "You're acting weird." "I almost died," I answered. "So what? People have heart attacks all the time. Doesn't mean you get to act like some martyr." I stared at him, at the boy who would become a man-child under my roof, and I realized something painful. He didn't see me as his father anymore. He saw me as an ATM with legs. That night, as his laughter carried down the hall. I opened the garage floorboard again and whispered to the envelope of cash, "You're the only one who listens." The days blurred together. I walked more, further each time, my legs growing stronger, my chest loosening. The doctors had told me recovery would take patience. But what they didn't know was that I had already spent a lifetime being patient. Now I was building endurance for a different kind of journey. One afternoon, I passed by the used car lot again. A dusty blue pickup sat near the edge of the fence, its paint chipped but body solid. A for sale sign leaned in the windshield. I stopped, stared, and felt a pulse of possibility surge through me. Not yet, I told myself. Not yet. Back at the house, Susan was on the phone again. She didn't notice the way I lingered in the doorway, listening. "Yes, I know he's still here," she said, her voice low but edged with annoyance. "Honestly, it would be easier if he just, I don't know, went somewhere else during the day. He's always underfoot." My heart clenched. Went somewhere else. She wanted me gone, but only in a way that kept her life convenient. Not truly gone, not permanently, just out of her sight, out of her way. That was when I realized the truth. I could leave, and she would hardly notice. She would probably be relieved. And Scott? He'd be angry, sure. But anger fades. He would find someone else to leech off of. He always did. I started to gather things quietly. A small duffel bag, hidden beneath old blankets in the garage. The jacket, a pair of jeans, the boots I had bought at the thrift store, a flashlight, a knife, even an old pocket Bible I hadn't touched in years. Each item I placed in that bag was a rebellion, a declaration. The envelope of cash grew thicker. I added coins, small bills, anything I could spare. When I lifted it, it felt like lifting a new heart, one that beat with possibility rather than despair. One night, I dreamed I was already on the road. I was driving through endless plains, the sky painted orange and pink. No one in the passenger seat, no voice nagging, no hand reaching out for money. Just me, the hum of the engine, and a horizon calling me forward. When I woke, I felt more alive than I had in years. At breakfast, Susan barely looked up from her coffee. Scott grunted, scrolling through his phone. Neither noticed the quiet smile tugging at my lips. Let them think I was fading. Let them think I was a ghost. Soon, I would be gone for real. The envelope under the floorboard was nearly full now, thick enough that I had to press hard to make the board sit flat. I had a bag packed, hidden in the darkest corner of the garage, and I had circled the number of the used car lot in my notepad. Every step, every detail was ready. All I needed was the courage to act. But the house had grown colder, heavier. Susan's silence was sharper than her words. Scott's eyes followed me sometimes, suspicious, narrowing whenever I passed. They hadn't said anything outright, but I could feel it. Somewhere deep in their bones, they knew I was pulling away. One evening, as I sat in the living room flipping through an old paperback, Susan walked in with a stack of envelopes. She dropped them onto my lap, without a word. Bills, gas, electricity, insurance. "You'll handle these," she said flatly, as if it wasn't even a question. "I already paid last month," I answered. "And this month, too," she snapped. "Don't start acting like you can just sit around. You're still here, aren't you? You can still write checks." I stared at her, at the woman who had once been my partner, my friend, my love. I saw only a stranger, irritated that I continued to breathe. Scott entered then, phone in hand, earbuds dangling. "Dad, I need 200. My car's shot. If I don't fix it, I can't get around. You don't want me stuck here all day, do you?" Something inside me snapped. "No," I said, louder than I intended. My voice echoed through the small room. "No more." They both froze, as if I'd spoken in a foreign tongue. "No more money," I continued, my chest heaving. "No more bills. No more handouts. I nearly died, and not one of you cared enough to sit beside me. I'm done." Susan's face twisted. "What's gotten into you? What's gotten into me?" I laughed bitterly. 47 seconds without a heartbeat. That's what. And do you know what I saw when I opened my eyes? Not you. Not him. Just emptiness. Scott sneered. "So what? You're just going to stop being a father? Stop being a husband?" "I stopped being those things a long time ago." I whispered. "You made sure of it." The silence that followed was suffocating. Susan crossed her arms, her jaw tight. Scott muttered curses under his breath, storming back to his room. I sat there, my hands shaking, my heart pounding like a drum. For the first time in decades, I had spoken the truth out loud. It felt dangerous. It felt holy. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to Susan's shallow breathing beside me. My decision was no longer just an idea, no longer a plan hidden under floorboards. It was real. It was now. Tomorrow, I told myself. Tomorrow, I make the first move. I got up at 4:30 in the morning, when the house was still breathing in sleep. Susan and Scott were asleep, completely unaware that I was already awake. In the silence, I touched the bag hidden in the dark corner of the garage. It was heavy, but not burdensome. It was freedom wrapped in fabric and locks. The streetlight through the window revealed dust on the old shelves, and I thought of the years spent here, between walls that no longer felt like home. My fingers slid over the lock, and the bag was ready. Stepping outside, I carefully closed the garage. The street still breathed the night, cold air cutting across my face. I approached the car I had bought with my savings just a week ago, parked in a dark alley near the house. The car was old but reliable, subtle enough not to attract attention. I opened the door and sat down. My heart pounded so loudly I could hear it more than the engine's hum. Every detail of the plan replayed in my head. Start the car, drive to a quiet street, hide until dawn, then move on. I checked my phone, almost dead, no messages. No one would notice my absence for hours. It gave me an advantage, but the pressure of time was enormous. I moved cautiously, the headlights cutting through the night while the shadow of the house remained behind me. Every turn of the wheel felt like a step into an unknown life. I recalled moments of joy with my family, but now they were only memories, barely warm on my skin. At the intersection, I stopped, my heart raced. Ahead was a road to mechanic's shop, where I planned to hide the car for the day, then refuel and head in the direction I had long prepared. Every moment was tense, as if the world held its breath for my next move. Finally, the morning light began to pierce through the trees. The city was waking, and I felt the freedom that had suddenly become real. It was cold, sharp like the morning, but it was mine. My first victory, my first night without chains, even if the world still slept. I stopped at the edge of a bridge, looking down at the river flowing quietly through the city. It was terrifying. It was beautiful. And I realized that with every step, every turn of the wheel, I would no longer be the person I was in that house. I would become the one who decides for himself. The city was waking, but I drove through quiet streets, every turn deliberate, every glance over my shoulder a habit I couldn't shake. The air smelled of wet asphalt and early smoke from bakeries preparing for the day. Each red light seemed to stretch time, forcing me to confront the reality that there was no turning back. At a small diner, I pulled the car into a shadowed spot. I needed coffee, a moment to think, and maybe directions. I kept my head low, eyes scanning. Inside, the few patrons glanced at me briefly, then returned to their cups and conversations. I ordered black coffee and sat in the corner. The warmth of the cup seeped into my hands, steadying them. I drank slowly, letting each sip remind me that I was still alive, still in control. I thought of Susan and Scott. Would they ever understand why I had left? Regret nibbled at the edges of my freedom, but I forced it back. Their world wasn't mine anymore. Mine was out there, on roads that stretched beyond maps, beyond expectations. As I left the diner, the sky brightened into a pale blue, and I could hear the city fully coming alive. The streets were filled with people going to work, buses rumbling, the occasional dog barking. I kept the car in motion, switching lanes carefully, blending into the flow. The first part of my journey was simple, mundane, even, but each mile carried the weight of decision, the gravity of departure. By midday, I reached a small roadside gas station. The attendant, a young man with a cap pulled low. Didn't ask questions. I filled the tank, paid with cash, and noted the exit routes on a crumpled map in the glove compartment. Every choice mattered now. Every wrong turn could undo the careful hours of planning. I drove out of the city limits, the houses giving way to open fields and low hills. The sun was higher now, and the wind through the cracked window brought a strange sense of clarity. I began thinking not just about where I was going, but who I was becoming. The old life, the rules, the confinements. They were memories that flickered like distant streetlights I had passed. Hours later, the car sputtered near a desolate rest stop. I had underestimated the old vehicle's needs, and the stress pressed heavily against my ribs. A low mechanic there, an older woman with grease-stained hands and a kind, knowing look, offered to help. While she worked, I sat on the curb, feeling exposed yet oddly reassured. She didn't ask questions about why I was traveling alone. She just nodded at my presence, and that silence was a comfort I hadn't expected. Back on the road, I realized the journey was not only about escape, but about understanding what I had left behind and what I might find ahead. With each mile, the tension loosened slightly, replaced by the cautious excitement of possibility. I imagined towns I had never seen, people I would meet, roads I would claim as mine. The freedom I had longed for was here, tangible and terrifying in its breadth. By the time the sun began to sink behind the hills, I reached a small town with dim streets and shuttered shops. I parked the car behind a large building hidden from view and walked slowly through empty streets. The shadows were long, and the air smelled of rain from earlier in the day. It was a quiet, watchful town, the kind where everyone noticed newcomers. I kept my head low, absorbing the unfamiliar rhythm, learning to move without leaving a trace. That night, I slept in the back of the car, under a blanket I had packed, listening to the hum of distant traffic and the rustle of leaves. Sleep came reluctantly, every sound in the night a potential threat or promise. And yet, despite the exhaustion and fear, I felt alive. More than alive, I felt awake, not to the world I had left, but to the one I was beginning to discover, step by cautious step, mile by mile. I drove along the long highway, where the morning fog had yet to lift, and the road seemed endless and silent. The car cut to the cold air quietly, and the mirrors reflected the soft sunlight breaking through the mist. With every mile, I felt the tension inside me slowly ease, and my thoughts began drifting back to simpler things. The smell of grass along the roadside, the rustle of wind to the trees, the steady rhythm of wheels on asphalt. On the side of the road, I noticed a small gas station with a loud sign, Old Oak. It seemed like only locals stopped here, and the atmosphere felt calm, almost homely. I pulled in to refuel the car and take a short rest. Behind the counter stood a woman with a friendly smile who seemed familiar, though I had never seen her before. "Good morning," I said. "Good morning," she replied. "While you're here, would you like some coffee?" "I'd love some," I said, taking off my hat and feeling a sense of relief. Sitting at a small table, I felt part of a world that suddenly seemed smaller and more understandable. Then I noticed a young man at the neighboring table, hunched over a notebook with a pencil, drawing intently. At first, I thought he was just an artist, but then I saw something in his eyes, the same curiosity I once had when discovering new horizons. "Are you drawing landscapes?" I asked. "Yes," he said, "but sometimes I try to capture the stories of the people I meet on the road. Every encounter is a small adventure." I smiled. It struck me that these little encounters are what make life richer. Every person we meet opens a new corner of the world. I realized I hadn't felt this light excitement from simple moments in a long time. Leaving the gas station, I continued my journey, but now I paid attention to every detail. The birds singing in the forest, the smell of fresh bread from small bakeries along the roadside, the smiles of people whose eyes briefly met mine. Each mile wasn't just moving through space. It was another step in my inner journey of discovery. At one point, the road led me to a small bridge over a river. The water was clear and the current gentle. I stopped, feeling time slow down. I put my hands on the cold metal railing and felt my thoughts clear. There was no rush here, only me, the road, and the river flowing on, indifferent to everything else. Perhaps, I thought, this is where something new begins. I left the bridge, carrying with me a sense of quiet curiosity. The road stretched endlessly ahead, winding through small towns and open fields, each turn revealing something I hadn't noticed before. The air smelled of wet earth and pine, a scent that brought back memories of long-forgotten childhood adventures. My hands rested lightly on the steering wheel, and I felt a rhythm in the car that matched the rhythm in my chest. By mid-morning, I arrived in a village that seemed almost frozen in time. Its cobblestone streets were lined with small houses, each with flowers spilling from window boxes. Children ran laughing in the streets, chasing a dog that barked joyfully. I parked my car and stepped out, taking in the warm sunlight and the gentle hum of life. For the first time in years, I felt completely at peace, as if I had returned to a place I had always known, though my mind could not recall when I had been there before. I wandered to a small square where a fountain trickled softly. Elderly men sat on benches, speaking in low voices, their eyes following the movements of the day. I greeted them quietly, and one nodded, offering a small smile. It was strange and wonderful, how a simple nod could make a stranger feel like a friend. I continued walking, my curiosity guiding me to a little bookshop tucked into a narrow alley. The door creaked as I opened it, and a bell announced my arrival. The shop smelled of old paper and ink, a comforting mixture that spoke of stories waiting to be discovered. A woman behind the counter looked up from a pile of books and smiled. "Looking for anything in particular?" she asked. "Something that reminds me of old memories." I replied, and she nodded knowingly. I spent hours in that shop, running my fingers along the spines of books, reading passages aloud in whispers, feeling the history in every page. There was a corner where sunlight fell perfectly on a worn chair, and I sat there, reading a story about a traveler who, much like myself, sought meaning in small, overlooked moments. Each sentence resonated with something deep inside me, stirring emotions I thought had long since faded. When I finally left, the afternoon was beginning to stretch its golden arms across the village. I felt a gentle determination to continue, to see what lay beyond the next hill, around the next bend. Driving again, I realized that this journey was no longer just about reaching a destination. It was about noticing everything along the way. I passed fields where farmers worked tirelessly, their hands moving in harmony with the land. I saw couples walking hand in hand, their laughter echoing softly in the distance. Each glance, each sound, each smell became part of the story I carried with me, a story that was growing richer with every mile. By evening, I reached a hilltop overlooking a valley painted in the fading light. The colors of the sunset were breathtaking, shades of gold, rose, and violet blending seamlessly. I parked the car and stepped out, feeling the cool grass beneath my feet. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying with it the quiet song of the world. I closed my eyes for a moment, breathing in the peace, the vastness, the simplicity of existence. For all the years I had lived, for all the challenges and losses I had faced, this moment felt pure, like a gift I had never expected but had always needed. And as the first stars began to appear, I felt a warmth in my heart. Perhaps life was not about holding on to the past or fearing the future. Perhaps it was about seeing, feeling, and embracing each moment as it came, with an open heart and quiet wonder. While I wandered through towns and valleys, unaware of time slipping by, I couldn't help but wonder what was happening at home. I thought of my family, their lives undoubtedly continuing without me, each moment shaped by my absence. I pictured my daughter pacing the floors, worried and sleepless, her hands clutching the phone, hoping for a call that never came. My grandson, I imagined, must have been confused, asking questions I could not answer, perhaps wondering if I had simply disappeared into thin air. My wife, the quiet pillar of our home, likely felt the same mix of fear and frustration that comes with not knowing. They must have retraced my steps, checked the places I love, called neighbors, and yet, in that anxious blur, they could not find me. I remember the phone calls I had ignored, the letters left unopened, the family notices, the worried messages, the futile search parties. I had no idea, lost in my own journey, my own need to see the world through eyes unclouded by routine. I imagined the dinner table, set for one less than usual, the empty chair a silent reminder of my absence. Laughter would have been subdued, stories untold because someone was missing. Perhaps arguments had flared, fueled by fear, miscommunication, and guilt. Perhaps my daughter had cried silently, hugging my wife in the quiet of the night, trying to convince herself that I would come back. And yet, in imagining their suffering, I felt a pang of sorrow deeper than any tiredness from my travels. I realized that while I sought peace and wonder outside, my absence had created a void in the hearts of those I loved most. Their days continued, yes, but not fully. My laughter, my counsel, the simple presence of an old man who knew their stories and their histories. It was gone, replaced by worry and uncertainty. I pictured the moment someone finally discovered where I had been. Perhaps a letter I had accidentally left somewhere, or the shopkeeper who remembered seeing me. Relief, mingled with anger, confusion, and disbelief, would wash over them. Their reunion would be full of tears, explanations, apologies, and hugs that lasted too long to count. And in that, I realized that journeys are never only about the traveler. They ripple outward, touching every life connected to them. For the first time, I understood that my need for wandering, for discovery, had consequences. And it was in this understanding that I felt a new resolve, not just to see the world, but to return to people whose hearts were tethered to mine, to reconcile my need for freedom with my responsibility to love and be loved. When I finally returned home, the air was thick with emotion. I saw my daughter's eyes glisten with tears, but now there was a warmth there, not just worry. My grandson ran to me, wrapping his small arms around my legs, and for the first time in so long, I felt the safety of home. My wife held my hand tightly, her grip telling me more than words ever could, relief, forgiveness, and love. It was as if my absence had reshaped our family. They no longer took the little things for granted. Every smile, every shared meal, every quiet evening together seemed to carry a weight of gratitude. They laughed with me, not just at my stories of the road, but with genuine joy, appreciating the simple presence of someone they feared they had lost forever. The arguments and misunderstandings that had once clouded our days seemed lighter now, overshadowed by a newfound closeness. I noticed my daughter lingering beside me more often, her questions now curious rather than anxious. My grandson followed me around, eager to hear about my adventures, his eyes wide with admiration and wonder. And my wife, ever the patient heart of our home, treated me with gentle care, a quiet devotion that seemed to radiate in every gesture. I realized that absence had made them see me more clearly, not as just a fixture in the household, but as a person with stories, fears, and dreams. And I, in turn, saw them with new eyes, understanding the depth of their love and the ways it had been tested. The past months of wandering had not only changed me, they had changed all of us, drawing our hearts closer than before. Now, home was not merely a place, but a feeling, a connection of shared moments, care, and laughter. And I felt, finally, that the journey outside had taught me how to cherish the journey inside, among those who truly mattered. Life slowly settled into a new rhythm. Mornings began with the aroma of fresh bread and coffee, my wife bustling about the kitchen, while my grandson chattered about school, the neighborhood, and all the small wonders he had discovered in my absence. I found myself listening more, really listening, to the laughter and stories that filled our home. Each day felt like a thread weaving us closer together, a tapestry stitched with patience, forgiveness, and rediscovered love. At first, the changes in their behavior were subtle. My daughter asking about my day, checking if I had eaten, offering to help with my tasks around the house. But over time, their attentiveness grew, not out of duty, but genuine care. My wife made sure I had a comfortable chair by the window, sunlight falling gently across the pages of the books I had collected during my wanderings. And my grandson, ever curious, began to follow me into the garden, wanting to learn about the plants I had tended, the stories of nature I had gathered on long walks. There were quiet evenings, too, where we sat together on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in colors I had never noticed until that moment. Conversations flowed easily, with laughter punctuating memories of the past and dreams for future. I realized that they no longer saw me as fragile or absent-minded. Instead, they valued my perspective, my stories, my presence. I tried to contribute in my own ways. I taught my grandson how to care for the small vegetable patch, how to listen to the wind, how to notice the tiny miracles in everyday life. My daughter, seeing me involved and patient, began to speak with more ease, sharing her worries and hopes without fear. And my wife, whose quiet strength had held the family together, smiled more freely, often joining us in simple games or storytelling sessions in the evenings. Even the chores, once tedious, became moments of connection. Washing dishes together, folding laundry, or preparing meals became conversations, laughter, and shared memories. I discovered the joy in small things, the sacredness of daily rituals, and the importance of being present. The absence had taught us all patience. No longer did we rush past each other or ignore the little signs of need. Instead, we learned to observe, to notice, and to act with kindness. My family began to anticipate each other's needs, to support each other silently, and to celebrate the mundane as if it were extraordinary. Sometimes, I would sit quietly in my favorite chair, watching them interact, and a wave of gratitude would sweep over me. The house, once familiar but perhaps taken for granted, now felt alive with care, respect, and love. My return had rekindled bonds, but the effort to nurture them was mutual. Together, we were learning, growing, and rebuilding not just a household, but the emotional home within our hearts. I often thought back to my time away, to the loneliness and solitude, and realized that it had taught me one of life's greatest lessons. Absence can reveal love's depth and presence. When embraced fully, can heal old wounds. Our family, once strained and distracted, had become a living testament to resilience, understanding, and the quiet power of being there for one another. Life did not become perfect overnight. There were still moments of tension, reminders of the time I had been away, and the habits we had formed in my absence. One evening, my daughter and I disagreed about how to organize the pantry. I insisted on a method I had used for decades, while she preferred a more modern approach. For a brief moment, frustration filled the air, and I felt the old sense of being distant, unheard. But instead of withdrawing, we both paused and listened. She explained why the new system made sense for her daily routine, and I shared my perspective with patience. In the end, we compromised, blending our methods, and the experience became a lesson in respect and collaboration. Another challenge arose when my grandson struggled with schoolwork. He wanted my help with mathematics, but I could see he was frustrated and close to giving up. Together, we approached the problem slowly, breaking them down into manageable pieces. I encouraged him to see mistakes not as failures, but as steps toward understanding. The pride in his eyes when he finally grasped the concepts was mirrored by a warmth in my chest. We celebrated together, not just a success, but the journey we had taken as a team. Holidays brought another dimension to our renewed connections. Our first Christmas together after my return was filled with small rituals: decorating the tree, baking cookies, singing quietly in the kitchen. But it wasn't just the traditions that mattered. It was the effort we put into being present for each other. We shared stories of past celebrations, laughed at forgotten mishaps, and created new memories that none of us would ever forget. Even the garden became a source of family unity. When a sudden storm threatened the vegetables and flowers, we rushed outside together, securing the plants and clearing debris. Hands muddy, clothes soaked, we laughed at our clumsiness and felt a collective pride in protecting something we all cared about. These moments, though small, cemented our bond, proving that we were stronger together than apart. Through it all, I noticed subtle changes in myself as well. I was less impatient, more willing to ask for help, and more attentive to their needs. We shared meals, stories, and quiet evenings, each interaction reinforcing the trust and affection that had once been fragile. The house, once just a structure, had become a home filled with dialogue, care, and mutual respect. I realized that family is not merely about living under the same roof. It is about showing up, being present, and valuing one another through both joy and hardship. The experiences we faced together, disagreements, school struggles, storms, holidays, were no longer sources of division but opportunities for connection. We had learned to navigate life side by side, embracing both imperfections and triumphs. At night, as I sat by the window, listening to the soft hum of the house and the gentle breathing of my family, I felt a profound sense of belonging. The past shadows were still there, but they were softened by understanding and love. We had found a rhythm, not in perfection, but in shared effort and presence. My family and I had rebuilt what was lost, brick by brick, conversation by conversation, laugh by laugh, until our home and our hearts were stronger than ever before. Time passed, and I began to notice the subtle transformations not just in my family, but in myself. The days once marked by tension and uncertainty had gradually become moments of quiet understanding, laughter, and shared responsibility. Each morning, as I walked through the house, I saw traces of life I had almost forgotten. My daughter humming while cooking, my son arranging his tools with pride, my grandson leaving tiny drawings on the fridge, each one a small declaration of presence and love. These details, seemingly ordinary, were the threads weaving our lives together. One afternoon, we sat together in the living room, sunlight spilling through the windows, casting warm patterns on the floor. My family shared their dreams and worries with me as if I had never been gone. My daughter spoke of her ambitions, my son of his uncertainties, my grandson of school and friends. I listened, really listened, and offered advice only when it was needed, letting them feel the autonomy and trust that I had learned to value. The room was filled with a quiet harmony, one that was earned, not given. The hardest moments came not from external challenges, but from confronting the ghosts of the past. Sometimes I remember the years I've been absent, the misunderstandings, the missed celebrations, and the distance that had once seemed insurmountable. In those moments, I felt a pang of sorrow, but it was softened by the evidence of the present, a family that had chosen to embrace me fully, that had not let old wounds define our future. I realized that forgiveness is not always spoken aloud. It is demonstrated in daily acts of care, patience, and respect. We celebrated milestones together, both big and small. Birthdays, graduations, even simple Friday dinners became sacred rituals of connection. We learned to take joy in each other's presence rather than focusing on perfection. Laughter became a medicine. Shared stories became bridges. And even quiet silences were no longer lonely, but filled with a comforting sense of belonging. I took the opportunity to share with my grandson not only knowledge, but lessons from my own life. I spoke of mistakes, regrets, and moments of courage. I wanted him to understand that life is a tapestry woven with both successes and failures, and that family is a safety net that allows us to fall without fear. His eyes, bright and earnest, reflected not just understanding, but trust, and that trust was the most precious gift I could ever receive. Winter gave way to spring, and the garden we tended together flourished. We planted seeds not only in the soil, but in the relationships we had nurtured. The blooms were symbols of resilience, the vegetables a testament to patience, and every shared harvest a celebration of collective effort. I realized that the home we had rebuilt was not merely a place, but a living testament to commitment, love, and understanding. In the quiet evenings, as I sat in my favorite chair with a cup of tea, I watched my family move about the house, interacting, laughing, and simply being. I understood, in a way I had never known before, that family is not defined by proximity alone, nor by absence or mistakes, but by the choice to be present, to care, and honor one another through life's challenges. I had once felt lost and disconnected, but now I was rooted, part of a living network of love and shared history. Looking back, I marveled at the journey we had taken. From moments of fear, misunderstanding, and separation, we had arrived at a place of connection and mutual respect. We had learned that the past cannot be changed, but the future is crafted through intention, effort, and empathy. And in this home, filled with laughter, patience, and enduring affection, I found my place, not as the observer of life from the sidelines, but as an active participant in the ongoing story of our family. As night fell, and I listened to the rhythmic breathing of those I loved, I felt a profound sense of peace. The road had been long, fraught with challenges and heartache, but it led to something far more valuable, a family strengthened by experience, trust, and unwavering care. I knew that whatever storms may come, we would face them together. And in that togetherness, I found the deepest meaning of home and family, a truth that will remain with me quietly every day of my life. Time passed, and I began to notice the subtle transformations not just in my family, but in myself. The days once marked by tension and uncertainty had gradually become moments of quiet understanding, laughter, and shared responsibility. Each morning, as I walked through the house, I saw traces of life I had almost forgotten. My daughter humming while cooking, my son arranging his tools with pride, my grandson leaving tiny drawings on the fridge, each one a small declaration of presence and love. These details, seemingly ordinary, were the threads weaving our lives together. One afternoon, we sat together in the living room, sunlight spilling to the windows, casting warm patterns on the floor. My family shared their dreams and worries with me as if I had never been gone. My daughter spoke of her ambitions, my son of his uncertainties, my grandson of school and friends. I listened, really listened, and offered advice only when it was needed, letting them feel the autonomy and trust that I had learned to value. The room was filled with quiet harmony, one that was earned, not given. The hardest moments came not from external challenges, but from confronting the ghosts of the past. Sometimes I remember the years I had been absent, the misunderstandings, the missed celebrations, and a distance that had once seemed insurmountable. In those moments, I felt a pang of sorrow, but it was softened by the evidence of the present. A family that had chosen to embrace me fully, that had not let old wounds define our future. I realized that forgiveness is not always spoken aloud. It is demonstrated in daily acts of care, patience, and respect. We celebrated milestones together, both big and small. Birthdays, graduations, even simple Friday dinners became sacred rituals of connection. We learned to take joy in each other's presence rather than focusing on perfection. Laughter became a medicine. Shared stories became bridges, and even quiet silences were no longer lonely, but filled with a comforting sense of belonging. I took the opportunity to share with my grandson not only knowledge, but lessons from my own life. I spoke of mistakes, regrets, and moments of courage. I wanted him to understand that life is a tapestry woven with both successes and failures, and that family is a safety net that allows us to fall without fear. His eyes, bright and earnest, reflected not just understanding, but trust, and that trust was the most precious gift I could ever receive. Winter gave way to spring, and the garden we tended together flourished. We planted seeds not only in the soil, but in the relationships we had nurtured. The blooms were symbols of resilience, the vegetables a testament to patience, and every shared harvest a celebration of collective effort. I realized that the home we had rebuilt was not merely a place, but a living testament to commitment, love, and understanding. In the quiet evenings, as I sat in my favorite chair with a cup of tea, I watched my family move about the house, interacting, laughing, and simply being. I understood, in a way I had never known before, that family is not defined by proximity alone, nor by absence or mistakes, but by the choice to be present, to care, and honor one another through life's challenges. I had once felt lost and disconnected, but now I was rooted, part of a living network of love and shared history. Looking back, I marveled at the journey we had taken. From moments of fear, misunderstanding, and separation, we had arrived at a place of connection and mutual respect. We had learned that the past cannot be changed, but the future is crafted through intention, effort, and empathy. And in this home, filled with laughter, patience, and enduring affection, I found my place, not as the observer of life from the sidelines, but as an active participant in the ongoing story of our family. As night fell, and I listened to the rhythmic breathing of those I loved, I felt a profound sense of peace. The road had been long, fraught with challenges and heartache, but it led to something far more valuable, a family strengthened by experience, trust, and unwavering care. I knew that whatever storms may come, we would face them together. And in that togetherness, I found the deepest meaning of home and family, a truth that will remain with me quietly every day of my life. Thank you for staying with me through my story. Life isn't always easy, and families sometimes drift apart. But it's never too late to reconnect, to forgive, and to build love again. Cherish the moments you have with your loved ones. Laugh together, share stories, and hold each other close. Remember, the little things matter the most. If my journey taught you anything, let it be this. Every day is a chance to create understanding, joy, and connection. Take that chance. And from my heart to yours, thank you for listening.